Hi, my name is John Gentry. I'm running for state senate for Sumner and Trousdale County. And I'm running for office for two reasons. Number one is to take down corruption in our state government. And the second, and the heart of my work, is teaching people how to directly participate in government, how to actually take control of our government. So on the corruption, I've already gotten rid of almost a dozen corrupt judges by exercising the right of remonstrance to the Tennessee General Assembly. And I've also been, as a citizen, I go down and I testify against legislation down in legislative committee hearings. And I've actually been successful stopping some of the bad legislation down there as a citizen. In Tennessee, I'm not exaggerating. Every year, they pass almost 1,000 new pieces of legislation every single year. And it is not possible that the welfare of the people requires that much legislation. I mean, just the sheer magnitude of it is proof of the corruption, that what they're doing is they're misusing the lawmaking powers that we delegated, and they're using that power mostly to create financial advantage for one special interest or another. And so I hope to stop a lot of that by standing on our state constitution. In our state constitution, actually in Article 11, Section 8, it actually expressly prohibits special interest legislation. The founders went through similar under tyranny, under the British Crown. Like the Stamp Act is a perfect example of where they were forcing us to use British paper for legal documents. And we have the same kind of legislation creating financial advantage from one special interest or another down in the General Assembly. So I know our state constitution better than anyone. I actually wrote and published a book explaining our state constitution. And I'm hopeful that if we have at least one senator standing up and defending the Constitution, that they won't overstep. And if they do, and if it's gross violation, obvious violation of our state constitution, I will take it to the Attorney General and I'll demand a legal opinion on there. So that's a big part of my work is reforming terrible corruption that's going on in our judicial branch, literally destroying the lives financially and emotionally for thousands of Tennesseans. And also, standing against corrupt legislation down there, a lot of it, which is the root of corruption that goes on in the judicial branch. So I hope to stop a lot of that if the people would see fit to put me in office for state senate for Sumner and Trousdale County. Now, about teaching people how to take back control of our government and how to actually participate in government, this is what the heart of my work is about. In Article 1, Section 1, it says that all power is inherent in the people. And we have at all times a constitutional right to reform the government. And the founders actually put the process, how do we reform government, is in Article 1, Section 23. And in that Article 1, Section 23, this is also how we directly participate in government. It's how the people actually propose laws that we want passed to deal with things like illegal immigration or what do we want government to do about school shooters, for example. This is how we directly participate in our government. And it's also how we take down corruption in our government. It's how I got rid of corrupt judges. So in Article 1, Section 23, the first part, it says citizens have a right to peaceably assemble together for their common good. And most people misassociate that, and they think that's strictly about protecting the right of street protest or marches. It absolutely is not. What that right is about, it protects people like you and I coming together and talking about our concerns and what do we want government to do or stop doing. That's what the right of assembly is really about. The next part says we have a right to instruct our representatives. This is actually a very powerful constitutional right that we have. It's only in 16 state constitutions. And in the first Congress, when they were adding the Bill of Rights to our federal constitution, they actually talked about putting the right to instruct representatives in our federal constitution. They ultimately decided not to, but they talked about it a lot. And from that discussion, we know that this is an incredibly powerful right, that if the instructions come from the majority of the people, It's not discretionary for our legislators. They have to obey our instructions. Now the last part, and this is the most important part, this is actually how we participate in government. It says that citizens have a right to apply to those invested with the powers of government by address or remonstrance. So this is where we actually have a right to make application to government and say, this is what we want government to do or stop doing. This is a law that we want passed. And we can make that application either by address or remonstrance. And by address, that literally means you as a citizen, or whoever your group decides to speak for the group, actually orally addressing the entire legislative body. That is an incredibly powerful constitutional right that we have not been taught, because our state constitution is not taught in any school at any level. And so the people don't know what their rights are, how to participate in government, how to actually control our government. So when I learned about this right, I went down to the Tennessee Archives Library, and I actually found thousands of examples where citizens were directly participating in government. They were petitioning the legislature for redress of grievance. For example, during the 1870 Constitutional Convention, and that's the Constitution as amended today that we use. During the 1870 Constitutional Convention, there were actually about 32 applications or petitions during the Constitutional Convention. The people were actually participating in writing our Constitution. And like, for example, one of the things that they wanted added to our Constitution is for the entire state of Tennessee to be a dry state. No alcohol anywhere in Tennessee. And obviously they didn't put that into our state constitution, but the point is, people knew how to participate back in the 1800s, and we've lost that today. And without the people participating in government, the only ones that our legislators are listening to are themselves or the special interests. And are the lobbyists, and so because the lobbyists are the only ones that are actually participating in government, that's why we end up with all of this special interest legislation, almost 1,000 bills every single year, because the people aren't participating. So from the archives, I learned the process for this, and it is super simple process. When I exercised this right, I wrote a petition of remonstrance. And remember, back in Section 23, we can make that application by address or remonstrance. A remonstrance, it's an old word. It's a formal written protest against government policy or government officials. That's a Black's Law Dictionary definition of a remonstrance. So I wrote a remonstrance. I was protesting corruption mostly in the judicial branch. And I gave that to a member of the Tennessee House of Representatives. And he filed that with the clerk of the House. And the same day, my petition was announced in front of the entire legislative body. 99 members of the Tennessee House of Representatives for the first time since the year 1850. Excuse me. So it was announced on there, Mr. Speaker, I'm approaching the Tennessee House on behalf of Mr. John Gentry involving a petition of grievances. And then they listed them out. One of them was judicial reform. And as a result of that, they removed the entire Tennessee Board of Judicial Conduct, almost a dozen corrupt judges. They threw them out of office because I proved to them that they weren't doing their job and they were protecting corrupt judges across the entire state. And I was asking them to abolish that agency. What they chose to do is they reorganized it. It used to be all judges, which was the Fox Watch and the Hen House. Now it's 8 new judges, 2 attorneys, and 6 citizens. And they have to report to the legislature and show them that they're actually doing their job. And for the first time in the history of this state, we're seeing judges suspended without pay for bullying and harassing litigants in the courtroom. Now you think about this. This is absolutely incredible that a single citizen can be heard like that and cause meaningful reform. There is nothing different between me and you. I work a living just like the rest of us. I am not wealthy. I am not connected. I just saw a problem that needed to be fixed. I stood up and I exercised my rights. I was heard by an entire legislative body, and I caused meaningful reform in government. And what I want you to see from this, imagine what we can accomplish as a people when we exercise these rights as one. We can bring government to heel. We can bring government back under our control by exercising these rights. And to teach the people this process, on my website, I uploaded a document. It's proposed amendments to the Tennessee Constitution imposing term limits for all judges, senators, and representatives. And I'm going around. I've already started back in January. I already have thousands of signatures. Over the next 2 years, I'm going to get 2 million signatures from people across the state of Tennessee. And as one people, we are going to assert our right to reform government and to instruct representatives demanding term limits. And what are they going to do? Can you imagine this? I guarantee, because of the work I have been doing for the last 10 years, our application will be announced on the floor of the Tennessee House of Representatives. I guarantee it. When I first tried to exercise that right, I emailed the entire Tennessee General Assembly. I emailed them all and I said, I encourage you to embrace this opportunity and welcome petitions from the people once again. And I had Senator Stevens, he's still in office. He emailed me back. He's like, who do you think you are? Only members can be heard on the floor. I'm like, well, Article 1, Section 23, citizens have a right to apply by address or remonstrance to those invested with the powers of government. I'm a citizen. You're invested with the powers of government. Are you not? Let's get to it. And so I had to fight to restore this right. But since I've exercised this right, I think at least 6 other citizens or groups of citizens have actually exercised this right and been heard in front of the Tennessee House of Representatives just like I would. So for term limits, can you imagine this? I go around over the next 2 years and I get 4 million signatures. And I guarantee you I will, because everybody in this state, we all want term limits. Can you imagine announced on the floor of the Tennessee House of Representatives, Mr. Speaker, I'm approaching the Tennessee House on behalf of the majority of the people of the state, asserting their right to reform government and instruct representatives demanding term limits. What are they going to do? Say no? The people don't have a right to reform government. They don't have a right to instruct representatives. We're going to paint them in a corner that they can't get out of. And we're going to set the example here in Tennessee for the other states to follow. And these same rights exist in the federal Constitution. And we're going to assert these rights as a people across this nation. And we're going to get term limits in the Congress. And I hope to see that in my lifetime. And I believe that this is the only way that it's going to happen, by the people taking back power that is inherent in us, by the people asserting fundamental constitutional rights that our founders enshrined in our state and federal constitutions. I believe this is the only way. Now let me give you a little more practical example of application of this right. I'm sure everybody remembers the Covenant School shooting, right? Down in Green Hills. They had 3 school employees, teachers murdered, 3 9-year-old kids murdered. This is a serious, legitimate concern, safety of our kids from school shooters. Well, after that incident, there was about 300 protesters down in the Capitol screaming and yelling, do something. They had 3 Democrats disrupt proceedings, protesting on the floor with a megaphone to do something about school shooters. To me, that is no different than a toddler throwing a temper tantrum. Knowing the rights in our Constitution, knowing the adult way, the constitutionally protected way to protest or to be heard in government, I think it's like toddlers throwing a temper tantrum. All those people had to do was to first come together, assemble, and talk about what specifically do we want government to do to protect our kids from school shooters. That's the first step. Assemble, talk about what do you want government to do or stop doing. Then write it up, make an application, and get a bunch of people to sign it. They could have got like 300 signatures down there, you know, in a couple of hours. And then they give it to a member of the House. I'm sure a member would have been happy to file that with the clerk. And then it gets presented on the floor in an orderly fashion. And that is way better than street protests or screaming in the hallway, acting like a bunch of toddlers throwing temper tantrums. This is the lawful legal process that our founders gave to us or enshrined in our state constitution to address government, to participate in government, and to actually control government and reform government, you know, through these rights. Now, going further on this, when the legislature is left to its own devices, they take circumstances like the Covenant School shooting and they twist it to their advantage almost every single time. And so what they either do is they find a way to create financial advantage for some special interest out there, or they use it to pave the way for further abuses of power. So what does our legislature do? They pave the way for abuses of power, and they start talking about putting in place red flag laws. Red flag laws are not going to do a lick of good protecting our children. And most certainly you can be assured that it will lead to abuses of power